Good evening and welcome
Your
to
home is the
Old
biggest
Dominion Realty's monthly live webinar. We're so excited to have you back again this week. And tonight our discussion is going to be on pricing your home properly for the market and why that's important. You can mail in questions as always to mail@odrva.com. And if we have any questions coming in throughout the streaming video, we will answer those at the end or as we get them. And you can also email questions later on, and we can answer those after the webinar as well, to mail@odrva.com. Tonight, I'm really excited to have some great panelists with me this evening. My name is Renee Whitmore. I am a real estate agent with Old Dominion Realty. And tonight I have with me Ron Ross, whom you've met before. Ron is with VBS Mortgage. And I also have Micah Branson. She is a certified appraiser with Colonial Appraisal Services. And Micah kind of wears two hats. She's a dual agent, or not dual agent, that's 007 speak. She is a dual license with the appraisal side as well as a real estate agent. So she's kind of got both sides of the fence there, and it's really nice to have her expertise with that. Last month, Pam and I talked to you about getting your house ready to list. We talked about the things that you could do to jazz up your home, to get the curb appeal going for you and get the inside nice and organized and decluttered, just ready to put on the market. And so you've done all those things, you've got all the house sparkling clean, and so you're asking yourself, now what? What's the next step? So the next step in that process of getting your home listed for sale is to really price your home properly. It's important to start your home priced properly because, quite frankly, it's going to sell quicker if it's priced really well. Also, when it comes to lending and getting the house, getting the house sold at the very end with the purchaser's lender, it's going to need to appraise. So a lot of times we can head off a lot of those questions, a lot of those issues before we even get there if we make sure that it's priced properly in the very beginning. One thing to keep in mind when you are pricing your property and when you're putting it on the market is that there's going to be different points of view. So our next slide here it's kind of a funnier one. It's basically showing you different points of view of your home. You as the seller, you've lived in the house, you've made lots of memories with your family, so you may have this cozy, warm feeling of what your house looks like. The buyer, when they come in, it's more of like a business decision for them and kind of what their family is going to be using the house for. So they're going to have a different point of view. And then, of course, your realtor is going to have a different point of view. Your lender, your appraiser, we're all going to have different points of view. And then the last funny part there is that the tax assessor, they want their point of view to make it look like it's really expensive, so they can tax you a little bit more for it. But so just keep in mind that pricing your home and marketing the value of it is very subjective, and everybody's going to have a different point of view on what exactly the value of that house is. From a realtor standpoint, we do what's called a comparative market analysis on your home, and that's done before we list it. We just make sure that our pricing is in line with what the market value of the house is going to be, what buyers are going to want to buy your house for, and then just to make sure that we're not having any issues come up when it comes to the appraisal. So as a real estate agent, what I like to do is sit down with my sellers, look at 3 or 4 different properties that are in the same neighborhood, the same size, the same type of house, just to make sure that we're all going to be on point with what that appraiser value is going to be like when they do their job in a couple of weeks. So really just to tie this in with Ron and with the lending side of things, where this comes into play to be really important is, the appraisal and lending that goes hand in hand. So I'm going to turn it over to Ron. He's going to tell you a little bit about how those two tie in together and kind of how that process works from his standpoint.
Sure, yeah, and I'm just going to touch a little bit on how we order appraisals and why we look at appraisals the way we do. The first part of that is how we order appraisals. There were laws passed several years ago that require us to do things certain ways. That is, we have to have a list of approved appraisers that we pick on a rotating basis. So, of course, VBS Mortgage, we have a list of local appraisers that we pick. Whoever's next in line will do that appraisal. The reason why we have to do that is so not one appraisal company or one appraiser is doing the majority of our appraisals for us. It's spread out throughout that list. When we order the appraisals, we are the client. There's a lot of discussion. There's sometimes some discussion between the buyers or somebody if they're refinancing a property, they want to talk to the appraiser, but that's really not the way it works. When we order an appraisal, it's put in our name. We are the client. Any kind of discussion or issues that come up with the appraisal, they're dealt with through us, and we kind of go back and forth. There's certain legal ways we have to go through any type of disputes or anything like that. So we are the actual client for the appraiser, not the borrower or the person trying to refinance the property. Why we look at appraisals the way we do, when we get to the point where we're ordering the appraisal, where we're reviewing the appraisal, we have done our due diligence to make sure that you are going to repay the loan. We have to look at the appraisal just in case something goes awry there. So we have to make sure that our collateral, what we are putting a lien against, is worth what you are purchasing it for. Of course, we don't want anything to happen, but there's always something. There can be things that come up in the future that are unforeseen, and if we were to have to foreclose on the property, then we need to know that the value's there in case we need to foreclose and resell that property. So. The way guidelines are these days, we're very strict on how those appraisals need to look. Without getting too far into it, different adjustments per lines and things like that. The appraisers know what those are supposed to be, and we hold them to that. We look at these things very closely. The appraiser can put any numbers they want to on the appraisal, but when it gets to us, we're going to look through the entire appraisal to make sure that those numbers are within our guidelines.
Yeah, so everything needs to be legit. Mm-hmm. One thing to really keep in mind is that the lender has to minimize their risk for sure, to make sure that that borrower is going to be able to purchase or be able to pay back that loan, and make sure that if something happens that they can't, that it can be flipped around and sold as a foreclosure, and they're not going to lose too much money. So
right. Unfortunately, when we're looking at the appraisal, we have to assume that we're going to foreclose, and that's why we have to look at it the way we do.
Yeah. Now, Ron, I get a lot of questions from sellers or from buyers saying, "Hey, my Uncle John who lives down the street, he's an appraiser. Can we save a little money and have him come in to do the appraisal for us?"
No, you're not going to save any money. You can have an appraisal like that done, but it'll be for your purposes only. Like I said before, when we order an appraisal, we have to do it a certain way. It has to be done per the letter of the law. So we can't just order an appraisal through anybody. It has to be whoever our next approved appraiser is.
Gotcha. Along those same lines, another question that we've had before come up is from a seller who may have had a buyer for their property who has already gone through that appraisal process and for whatever reason was not able to purchase the property. Can they use that appraisal for the next borrower?
Typically not. Again, we're really held to the fire on how we have to do things. So it would be outside of how we have to do things in order to use that. So we would have to order a brand new appraisal and have it put in our name.
Gotcha. And then just to reiterate what he said earlier about the lender being the client, just because the purchaser is actually paying for the appraisal doesn't mean that it's actually in their name. So it is in the bank's name or the lender's name. So cool. Well, I appreciate all of your information on the lending side of things. It really helps to know why those appraisals are important for the lender standpoint. And this takes us over to the actual appraisal process. So once you have a buyer who is, contracted to purchase your property, they may have gone through some inspections of their own, for the home inspections and that sort of thing. The next step is for them, after they've gone through with Ron and the application process, is the appraisal. So we've got Micah here this afternoon or this evening to kind of discuss with us that appraisal process and kind of how she goes about doing her job as an appraiser. So Micah, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can let us know what you do as far as the appraisal.
Absolutely, Renee. I've been appraising for 8 years, and I do the bulk of my work for local lenders such as Ron. And it depends on where the actual request comes from as to how I do my job. I do work for private individuals, local banks, and then secondary lenders like VBS Mortgage. And in doing that work, I do learn what those lenders want and what their guidelines are. So I try to stay within their guidelines and play defense on them, if you will, so that I don't get too many calls back in the end and make their job easier and reduce their risk as my client. The first thing that I'll do is call the borrower or the owner of the home and set up the appraisal appointment when it suits them. Within, a typical workday schedule. I will go out, and the first thing I'll do is walk through your home on the inside first so that I don't track anything through your well-appointed house that you've talked to Pam and Renee and staged so nicely. I'll go through each room, write down the interior finishes and the amenities of those rooms, and any upgrades that you've done, and anything that you've added to the home. I'd be happy to know that information and take it down so that I can take it into consideration. I then measure the outside of the home for square footage and take pictures on the exterior. The whole process probably takes about a half an hour to an hour, depending on how involved the improvements are and how big the house is.
Yeah, very cool. So while you're in the house, Micah, I know that there's a laundry list of things that you guys look at when you're doing your adjustments for properties and that sort of thing. Touch basis on kind of the things that you feel are the most important, when you're looking at that subject property.
Sure. I have an entire page that is nothing but data about the home, so when I ask you very specific little questions, they're all to fill in a certain part of my appraisal report. And then what you'll see on the slide here that we have is certain things that I go through and take down about your house and then compare to the most recent comparable sales that I can come up with. Some questions that quite frequently arise are on the condition of the home and the quality of construction of that home and what goes into it. I use a scale that was provided to us in 2011 through government regulations on condition. It ranges C1 through C5, C1 being a home that has never been lived in and is brand new. C2 would be an excellent home, maybe that's been perfectly updated and staged. As they talked about in a previous webinar, a C3 might be in great condition, but not well updated, maybe not completely redone kitchen or bathrooms. C4 has some deferred maintenance, and C5 needs quite a bit of help. And there are ways to finance a C5, but Ron can probably give you more information about those, but you're going to have less risk with a home that's in better condition. So
Yeah. So along the same lines of the condition and quality construction, if the quality of construction is a little bit, like say a really nice home that has, 2x6s or, really, heavy on the insulation and some really good quality construction, you put a little bit more emphasis on that versus something that might be just kind of, spec grade building.
absolutely. We have a quality of construction scale as well, and that goes from a Q1 down to a Q5. The Q1 being probably the best level of construction you can have. So what I try to do is compare your home to the most similar homes as far as a quality of construction. And if I don't have homes that are that similar, I'll make an adjustment for that quality of construction if there's granite countertops, hardwood floors, tray ceilings, those type of things in your home.
What about square footage? Can you talk to us a little bit about the square footage of the house and kind of how you go about with that?
Yes, and you'll see on the grid there about halfway down, there are boxes for total rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms, and above grade square footage. When I'm collecting my information and when I compare it to other houses, I like to compare apples to apples, and the rules and regulations that govern us require me to compare above grade square footage, above grade bedrooms and bathrooms. So a lot of borrowers will look at their appraisal report and say, wait a minute, she missed a bathroom, but it might be in the basement. That's adjusted for on the next line down. I will break out the finished and unfinished square footage of your basement, and then I'll also have room counts down there, bedrooms, bathrooms, and so forth, and give you value for that as compared to the homes I compare it to.
Yeah.
And I would just interject there, from a lending standpoint, that's when I said there's a lot of guidelines that we look at and kind of hold them to certain percentages and things like that. There's very few times will you go out and appraise a home that's exactly like the home that you're trying to get the value for. So each one of those lines, there will be adjustments on it, and according to our guidelines, those, when you make those adjustments, they have to be within a certain range. So that's one of the things that Micah, when she's doing it, she knows what those ranges are, and that's why you can't go out and look at a 5-bedroom property and compare it to a 2-bedroom property and make it work, because we won't allow that.
Yeah. It's really important to see kind of how all these puzzle pieces fit together. It's neat to know that it does. It's all jives and it all works, and it's all there for a reason. So once you've got to the property and you've kind of noted all those things about the subject properties, what we'll call it, or the person's house that you're purchasing, you know, how do you come about getting an actual value, you know, pulling information from other sales?
Right, and the next slide, you'll see the entire adjustment chart. What I showed you before was just on your property, and then I'll compare it to the most recent 3 sales I can come up with. And knowing the lending requirements of most of my clients, I have to stay within 1 year of the date that I go out to look at your house and use the most recent comparables I can, because they're more indicative of the market and more credible indicators of value. Probably the next thing that I go to is square footage, because those are your larger adjustments. I try to stick with properties that have the same or similar above grade square footage to yours.
I think it's really important to note when you said that you go out and find properties within a year, it's really important because you've got, you know, the market has been changing, especially here recently, changes dramatically within a year. So if you think about, you know, May of 2013 versus May of 2014, it's a huge difference in what the market is like. So finding properties that are the most recent can be the most indicative of what you're going to be seeing as a value for the house that you're purchasing or that you're trying to sell. So I think it's really important that you note that it has to be within a year, and you probably try to get it within 6 months if you can.
I'll use the most recent 3 I can find if I'm lucky enough to have quite a few in the last 6 months.
Yeah, that's always the hard part, is finding those comps that have sold, especially if it's been a slower time of year or something like that. So the next slide that we have, or the next few slides that we have, are some photos of different houses, and we're going to kind of go through, and Mike is going to point out a few things about you know, the comparables of the house on the left and the house on the right, to kind of show you a little bit of things that they look for when you know, appraising a house. The first one here, we have 2 brick ranches, and Micah, talk to us about these 2 brick ranches.
These 2 could conceivably be used as comparable sales together. You'll notice that the one on the left does have a 2-car garage, and the one on the right appears to not from this shot that we have. You're only as good as the information you're provided. The other thing to note is that the one on the left does not have a basement, and the one on the right appears to have a walkout basement. And it's important to define that too. Your above grade square footage, anything completely above grade, and anything considered below grade square footage, if there's even one corner of that basement or below grade level that is underground, even one corner of it, then that entire floor is considered to be below grade. And those are not the rules that I make, but they are the ones I have to abide by.
Yeah.
So.
It's unfortunate if you do have a house that's mostly above grade, and then you do have like a corner or something that is below, because it does feel like it's all above grade square footage.
And you'll see that on the next slide too. The house on the left definitely has a walkout basement with lots of natural light, but the whole front side of it is below grade, so that entire level is going to be considered below grade.
Yeah. And then of course my favorite is the kitchen, you know, comparing the kitchens here. So you've got, Michael, we've got a 1970s kitchen versus a brand new, newly updated kitchen. Talk to us a little bit about, you know, the difference in these 2 kitchens and kind of how you look at them.
One part of my report, I have to write down whether the house is updated or not, and that kind of becomes a gray area, because sometimes you'll have a kitchen that looks like this one on the left, and then you'll have bathrooms that look like 1970. So it's never a complete. It's a sliding scale, in other words. But I will give you credit for an updated kitchen. Probably not on a dollar per dollar basis, and I know Renee has to explain that to quite a few clients, and so do I. When you go to upgrade a house, you might spend $10,000 in the kitchen, but the next buyer that comes in would have spent that $10,000 differently, so you don't get a dollar for dollar return on your investment.
Yeah, that's definitely a question that we get a lot is, you know, hey, I spent 20 grand on this kitchen, you know, why are you telling me that it's not worth $20,000 to my value? And it just is not the case. You know, you wouldn't expect to go to a car dealership and purchase a used car for the same amount that you would, you know, purchase the brand new one for, you know, 3 years ago. So it's important to note that, you know, the rules are kind of the same in this situation too, where you just do not get dollar for dollar out of remodels and that sort of thing. But what we tell folks when they're doing remodels and they're asking, what should I do here and what should I do there, you know, do it for what you know, for what you love and for your use out of it, and not necessarily for that resale. Now, if you are doing it for the resale, you know, talk to your real estate agent about, you know, the finishes and stuff that might get you a better bang for your buck, but know that that buck's not gonna be dollar for dollar, so. The next slide we have are two different houses, and probably the most notable thing here to note is that they are two different square footages. Obviously, you're going to be adjusting for that, but let's assume that for this slide here, that they're the same square footage. We've got one bathroom in the one house and three in the other, so talk to us a little bit about that as well.
Right, and if, considering this is all above grade square footage, I'm gonna adjust for the 2 additional bathrooms and give, you know, the house credit for having 2 additional bathrooms.
Yeah.
So you would get money back on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, one of the questions that we get here, especially locally, because we don't run into them very often, is the swimming pool question. Is, you know, I've got a really nice swimming pool out back. How much money does that put in as a value to my house?
And there people are disappointed too on not getting dollar for dollar back, but in this area, a pool's not all that common and typical. If we were in Daytona, Florida, I think you would expect to have a pool in every backyard. But around here, they're not that common, and when I put on my realtor hat and show property, I hear a lot of my clients see a pool in the backyard and say, oh my, that's a lot of work, or I would fill that in with dirt. I've heard that before too. So, you know, one man's treasure is another man's trash, but when I go to value a pool, what I will do is find out how much it would cost to build that pool new, and then I will figure out what the market contribution of that pool would be to your common and typical buyer.
Yeah. Also, talk to us a little bit about how you look at above ground pools, because I know a lot of folks are it's easy to do, you know, if the kids want a pool in the backyard, do an above grade pool. How much value, or what kind of a value does that add to your house?
And there's some really nice above ground pools out there, but they are not considered to be fixtures. These are not permanently attached to the real estate, and they're not taxed as so. So I consider them personal property, and I give them no value because I'm not allowed to give them any value.
Gotcha. I hope that helps clear up any information about the pools. I know one of our appraisers that we used to have at the Colonial, he used to always kind of make the joke that it's hard for him not to take money off of an appraisal for a pool at some levels. So it's kind of interesting to hear different takes on that.
And there has been some loan products in the past that wouldn't issue a commitment or do a loan if there was a pool involved.
Oh, wow.
USDA used to be that way.
Yeah, and I'm sure it really affects, you know, like the insurability and that sort of thing in houses too. But yeah, it's always interesting. There's the whole pool debate of whether or not it's good or bad or kind of indifferent for some people. But that kind of wraps up what we wanted to tell you guys about, you know, our appraisal process, and, you know, just kind of want to bring it back all around together and remind you, you know, everybody in this whole process works together, and they're all little pieces of the bigger puzzle. So you have your real estate agent in the beginning who's helping you price the property. Of course, after you're doing all those wonderful things to it to get it ready to sell and put on the market. So your real estate agent's going to help you price it in the beginning, and then once you get that buyer who's there, they're going to give you a price for it. It may be the same price that you priced it at. It might be the same purchase price, might be a little bit less, might even be a little bit more, you never know. But then it's going to roll around to your lender, and when they order that appraisal and Micah comes out and appraises the property, you know, you're really going to have to have everybody working together and making sure that that price on that property is market value, and that we can get a loan on it. Because everybody's working towards the same goal of selling the property, and it's important to note that no one's trying to squill the deal, so to speak. So absolutely. We want to thank you this evening for coming by and spending your evening with us. We know it's been beautiful and sunny outside, so it's hard to come in and listen to folks talk about real estate. But just knowing that the real estate market's been really, really wonderful this spring, it's important to kind of get the process and educate yourself on kind of what to do. Want to again introduce everybody that was up here this evening and kind of let you know how you can contact us. My name is Renee Whitmore. If you have any questions for me specifically, you can go to my website, which is www.reneewhitmore.com, and from there you'll see some different ways to contact me, whether it's email or whether it's my phone number. Micah, if someone has questions for you, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys at Colonial?
Go to odrva.com and click on Appraisal Services, and we're available for you there.
Excellent. And Ron, how can we get in touch with you?
All my information is on our website as well, vbsmortgage.com.
Fantastic. So you've got a lot of ways to contact us. If you have questions that you'd like to ask for, the next couple of hours or even the next couple of days, and you've forgotten any of those website addresses, you can go to mail@odrva.com and email us any questions through that venue as well. We want to thank you again, and then we want to welcome you to join us next month. We will have our next series on investment properties and how real estate can be a fantastic investment. So we welcome you to come back with us on June the 10th at 6:30. So you'll visit odrva.com, and of course on the homepage, as you did this evening, you'll just see us, our bright shining faces there. Thank you so much, and we will see you guys next month.